Are the Spurs the perfect team for Wemby? The Spurs won a draft lottery. Victor Wembamyama is going to the Spurs. We all know that. And this has some people saying maybe it might be rigged, right? Because there's some obvious Spurs connections. Tony Parker, one of the greatest Spurs ever, is from France. Boris Diaw from France. France has a big Spurs fandom. And Victor, he said, I woke up this morning and I thought this was the team I was going to. Maybe the NBA handed him a little something to keep his mouth shut and say, listen, this is where you're going. But ultimately, this is where he is going. And I can't think of a better spot for him. I would have loved Dallas. I had my top 5 preferred destinations. Number 1 was the Mavericks. Number 2 was the Spurs. The Mavericks were always unrealistic. The Spurs had a great chance to get him. And I look at this team, and Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson are 2 players that can score 20 points per game, space the floor. Jeremy Sohan, I think, is going to be a Swiss Army knife in this league. Then Victor Wembanyama and the other young players they have, like Blake Wesley, Zach Collins, Malachi Branham. Those are some good role players, and they have $40 million in cap space. I think this team is on track to really surprise everybody. If Victor is as good as we think he's going to be early on, which is at least giving you 18-6 or 20-6 a night, maybe even 20-10 because of his size. But usually players of that size aren't the league's best rebounders. I think this team can push for a playing spot. I think they're that talented. And I like their pieces a lot, especially coached by Greg Popovich. I don't see how a team that was led by DeJounte Murray just 2 years ago was able to make a playing push. With Victor now, they should make it.
Why?
Right.
Like, where was the okay.
I don't think they should
hold
rush
on.
the timeline.
Because why'd you just do that?
What?
You looked at me the whole time. You saw me smirking, and then you brought up the DeJounte stuff. Like, what's up?
I'm saying they were able to make a playing push with DeJounte Murray.
The West is much better than what it was.
I mean, I think with Victor, he's generational. I mean, we're not talking about just a regular guy.
LeBron didn't make the playoffs for sure.
Team's not as good as this team right now.
Good point.
Who did the Cavs have outside of LeBron?
Ricky Davis?
Let's talk about Victor. I don't think
even
the
remember
Spurs should pull what the Mavericks did with Luka, where is Victor Wembanyama a generational prospect? There's no doubt about it. But he also is raw. I don't think in the NBA is going to be this high-octane three-point shooter, which we saw early on in that G League game versus Scoot Henderson. He takes a lot of threes. I think what it's going to come down to is Greg Popovich molding him into where the Spursian-type player is going to take a lot more mid-rangers and build his game off of there. Right now, he's a pretty limited passer. I mean, his turnover ratio was pretty poor this last year. He's going to have to build the right habits, playing more off the ball, an offense that won't entirely be built around him, though he will be the focal point. His biggest value, his asset right now, is going to be defensively. He's one of the greatest rim protectors I've ever seen. I mean, at 7'5", his recovery is something you probably have never seen before. He's got an 8-foot wingspan. He flips his hips so naturally. He's got nimble footwork, and all the while he's got good instincts to anticipate stuff. It helps obviously when you're the biggest guy on the floor by a country mile. He's 3 or 4 inches taller than Joel Embiid, who's 7'2". With all that being said, I look at this Spurs team with 4 first-round picks coming in from the Hawks, 1 from the Celtics in 28. They've got another from the Raptors for one of the Jakob Poeltl trade. What it really does come down to is building a team around him with a better point guard. Trey Jones is a free agent. I don't think he's going to be the facilitator that Victor needs early on. And if I'm them this offseason with the $46 million we have in cap space, I'm not splurging on a Harden to make sure that in year 1 he's going to have that facilitator. I want to get another top 5 pick in next year's draft and then use some of that remaining cap space on a better point guard in the market. But I think the end goal right now, or the goal for this season by the end of this year, is getting Victor to develop as much as possible while saving enough cap space to have the flexibility when he's in year 2, year 3, and year 4 to then make that splash. But I don't think there's much pressure on this team to make some move right away. I think they should be patient here with this young core they have.
So they do have their own pick, Charlotte pick, in Toronto, first-round pick.
Shouldn't they have
right now?
Shouldn't they have Atlanta's pick right now?
I think that's 2025. Yeah, I'm talking about 2024. They have their own Charlotte, Toronto. Maybe this doesn't show. This is fans though, so maybe it doesn't show swaps. But it's Atlanta's 2025 and 2026 and 2027. Yeah, so maybe it shows more. Did you find it? It's not popping up.
What, their own picks?
No, the Atlanta. Was you trying to find if They had,
No, I wasn't trying. I was looking at the mock draft stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a bunch of Rockets fans saying that Anthony Black over Amon should lane Jalen Alcatraz.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're fucked, by the way, buddy.
That's wild, man.
Yeah. I agree with John. Unfortunately, John is wrong because the media is going to put an insane amount of pressure on this young man. They're going to put an insane amount of expectation. I mean, you saw Broussard and Nick Wright having a field. It's so insane. But speaking in here, in the nice – they were talking about if he's not at least KD or Hakeem.
No, Chris Broussard said if Victor Wembanyama is not Hakeem, or if he is Hakeem, Anthony Davis, or Kevin Durant,
disappointment.
He is a disappointment.
Nuts. Hakeem is like a top 10 player.
Bro has to be a top 2 player of all time.
Yeah, all right, whatever. But in here in the studio, we're very not over the
logical.
board. Yeah, somewhat logical. And I think there shouldn't be a lot of pressure on this young kid. He is generational, but like you said, he's a little bit raw. You know, he has to come in. He has to fit more to the NBA game. He has a lot of game to work on. And the Spurs don't have to rush anything. Like you mentioned it. Trey Jones, we were talking about this earlier. Trey Jones is a fine guy, but they do need somebody better at the point guard position. They do have Devin Vassell. They do have Keldon Johnson. They do have Malachi Branham. So they do have good players there already. They have a lot of draft capitals, a good amount where they can add more assets down the road. They have a lot of cap space. They have Greg Popovich. They actually have a good staff now that I was looking at it. So they have a good connection to get Victor to give Victor what he needs and to continue to make him better. I don't think just because he's generational, you have to put this insane amount of pressure. We've done it to players before, and I don't think we should do it to Victor. I didn't think we should do it to them before. It happened to Zion, happened to LeBron. There was so much insane pressure on them to be great right away. And sometimes greatness happens. It takes some time. You know, we've seen guys like Steph Curry blossom late. He turned generation. So sometimes it takes time. And I think Victor, you know, he landed in the right position because the Spurs – rigged enough have developed great bigs from David Robinson to Tim Duncan. So even LaMarcus Aldridge went there. He was really good. Boris Diaw went there. He was really good. So they've developed or aided these guys in developing their game, and I think that's something really important, especially the movement and the system that San Antonio likes to run. It's a lot of Europe-style offense, so I think that's really good for Victor. He could kind of come in, transition easily. But this is a slam dunk for San Antonio, slam dunk for Victor. You saw how excited he was to go to San Antonio. I think this works perfectly for him. It's the spot that he needed. You know, we talked about Charlotte, but their dysfunction in the front office and the players that they have may not be ideal. We talked about Houston, but the young players might rattle Victor's mindset, might put him in the wrong position. We talked about other teams, but San Antonio, with the players they got, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, keep their head on straight. They're kind of to the point. They work hard. They stay out the media. Trey Jones is another one that does that. Greg Popovich. These guys stay on the right track, and I think this is somewhere Victor should have wanted to go.
Actually, that video came up in my timeline today of DeJounte Murray, if the Spurs, what was it? Spurs.
The Spurs out of the league.
Yeah, that shit came up today. I was crying watching that today.
Yeah, it's always funny to watch it.
Yeah, but no, this is a great spot for Wemby. I feel like I almost overlooked this spot because you just imagine like, oh, LaMelo and Wemby, Jalen Green and Wemby, right? You think about all of these potential landing spots, and like San Antonio is almost boring in a sense because you don't think of Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell and Trey Jones in the same light. I mean, as they should, as guys like LaMelo and Jalen Green who have a higher upside. But this is great because I think Wemby could just stay out of the way. San Antonio, a small market, and you're going to be paired with, the best coach, one of the best coaches of all time. Right now, Popovich has been more or less unserious with the Spurs team after the dynasty left. Tim Duncan got old and all of those guys moved on. But now that he has a young team and all of the cap spaces John mentioned, the future draft assets, you could finally start looking at this Spurs team taking shape. And Victor Wembanyama is someone who's going to come in and automatically be a game changer. What they were desperately needed, and you could say this about damn near any team, but you need someone to change the franchise, right? As great or as high as you might be on a guy like Keldon Johnson or Devin Vassell, these are not guys that are going to come in and be able to carry you to the finals. And of course, you're not expecting that from Victor year one, but his ability to be 7'5" and play like a fucking guard and basically do anything you want on a basketball court is the type of player that could carry you to a championship. I know there's videos going out of Kenny Lofton being able to back him down in the post and hitting layups on him and drawing fouls and all that shit. And there's going to be times during his rookie season where he doesn't look great. There's going to be times where he's going to get bullied. But more or less, that's just the nature of the NBA, right? We have, no matter who you are, you have these welcome to the NBA moments where it's like, oh shit, Pablo Prigioni just put up 15 on me. Like, what the fuck happened, right? There's just so many good players out there that Victor Wembanyama is not going to look great for 82 games for 48 minutes, and he's going to struggle. But for his long-term, I think, outlook on his career, this is a great spot for him where he could just focus on ball, be coached by one of the best, and just stay out the way.
I don't agree with the notion that the Spurs should just continue losing until they get another top player. Because, I mean, for one, Wemby said it after the Spurs won the lottery, is that he wants to win the championship as soon as possible. I understand you don't take that at face value, but the Spurs are in a situation where their roster is depleted of talent and they cannot be competitive. We've seen this team with DeJounte Murray, a similar group of guys, make the play-in tournament. So this supporting cast is capable of at least winning some games.
Being competitive.
And
They
if
almost lost 50 games, though.
So wait, so can I ask
if you prop in a player like Victor,
Right.
and you don't have to get a James Harden in free agency, you don't have to get some big time name. Just get players that are veterans and can complement the rotation. I don't see why the Spurs shouldn't want to be as competitive as they can as soon as possible.
But you're saying, like, DeJounte is understandable, but the West is much better than what it was that year. There's about 10, 11 teams that can really compete this, like, in the West.
Okay, if you're going by that, then I want to find that out for myself.
Right.
I want my team. I want to put my team in the best position to win and find out if we stack up
But
for ourselves. I don't want to go into the season saying this year is just to develop Wemby.
that part
We're not
I
trying to
agree.
win. We want another top pick.
Here's the thing. They've only been tanking for one season. What you don't want to do is what the Mavericks did, where you shorten the timeline, and then the runway to contending is so abrupt and so short that you're almost staying in the margin for error.
But did the Mavs do that, or was that just Luka being great?
They did that with Luka and KP, and by his second, third season, he was expected to do that, and they had no lottery talent around.
But this is
With
the
Victor, I think you're right. You're on the right path. You want to bring the veterans. But what I was kind of getting at here is you don't want to take a page out of Dallas's playbook and not put more young talent around him.
I think you use Dallas a lot, and I don't think that's a fair example when it comes to this, because Dallas had a lot of miscues along the way that has put them in the current position they're at now. I don't think Dallas went wrong by not tanking and acquiring talent. You're basically saying that the Mavericks should have continued tanking so they would have had top picks to select at the top of the draft. That's not what I believe. In the same Luka draft, they drafted Jalen Brunson. They made a conference finals in Luka's fourth year. So 4 years in, they made a conference finals, and that was disrupted because they didn't bring Brunson back when they had multiple opportunities to re-sign him. How many teams right now in the NBA do we see are competitive and they lack that lottery talent? But it's great coaching, it's a player at the top you trust, and it's a bunch of complementary role players.
What young team right now lacks lottery talent and still is competitive?
The Miami Heat is a perfect example of that.
That's different.
Bam
They have a
and Tyler.
superstar.
Yeah.
And Bam is
The
a
Milwaukee
Bam was a
Bucks
lottery
are
talent.
the Milwaukee Bucks are a prime example of that.
That's a good one. That they also have a superstar. We're talking about a rookie coming in right now, and you're talking about he needs to, like, we're not saying go out there and outright lose, but there's no rush to be in the play, and there's no rush to make the playoffs. There's no rush
There's
to
no
be
rush.
successful.
I'm not saying there's a rush to.
Yeah.
But this team is good enough to do that.
I
we-
don't.
I think we
It depends on
agree.
free agency. It depends on free
And
agency.
Because
free agency, you should
heading it-
add in a center like Brooke Lopez, Miles Turner, or even a Grant Williams, like one of those thicker post defenders that Victor can
We'll
play
have
the
to trade
four.
for Miles Turner.
Like, for example,
You have a first round pick.
Like, for example, did you expect the OKC Thunder to be in the play in this past season?
No way.
No.
I don't think I
Not a
did.
shot.
They exceeded expectations, and I don't think I view that as a negative. I don't look at that and say, wow, the OKC Thunder should have actually been bad, so they would have gotten a top 5 pick. I think that the season was successful. And it's not like the Spurs, this is the first time they've tanked this deliberately, but the last couple of years, I mean, this past draft, Jeremy Sohan, 9th pick, Malachi Brandon, 20th pick. They had a pick in the lottery in Sohan, and the year before, Josh Greenwood didn't pan out, but he was a 12th pick. The year before was Devin Vassell, the 11th pick. So with Vassell, Sohan, and Wemby, those are 3 lottery picks you have there, and Keldon Johnson is a borderline all-star level player. So I don't think this team lacks talent. And
No one's saying
if
that.
and also, I know nobody's saying that, but I don't believe in the idea of trying to lose. I don't think so. And I think the Mavericks caught themselves in a bad situation because they made a myriad of moves that have put them here. But when it comes to the San Antonio Spurs, there are more examples of teams that have a top star and their team is filled out by players that may have not been picked at the top of the draft. We saw in 2019 with the Raptors, it was Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Serge Ibaka, Norman Powell. All those guys were not lottery picks. Yeah. You know, we see it all the time. So that's why I just don't agree with the notion that the Spurs should continue tanking. And I think this team can compete. They can make a play-in push. And if they don't make it because the West is so damn competitive, that's fine.
So win-win.
Exactly. But I don't agree with saying, you know what, let's not try to sign these quality free agents because we don't want to win as much as possible. I think year one, they should try to win as much as possible.
Well, I just don't think Harden's the best example of quality free agents. That's why.
I don't think he's going to be a target for them either. I don't. I think I would be fine with Trey Jones starting at point guard for them.
For this year, I agree. I don't think anyone's saying they should continue to tank, but I want you to keep in mind, from 2020 to 2022, they were trying to win in those years.
They went 34, 48, 33, and 39.
Like
32 and 39. They have not been good for 4 years.
This was the first year they tanked, like I mentioned. I agree with you. They got to make some moves in free agency to add some depth and quality pieces that fit around Luka. What I'm getting at is that while you don't have to tank, there's no pressure to win in year one.